The Law Matters. Welcome once again. I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. As we tell you, this long-running program continues to provide legal information, relevant examples, and practical assistance to help you with legal matters because the law matters. A better understanding of the law puts you in a better position to handle your legal affairs for yourself, your family, or your business. As we present various topics, you may decide, as we suggest at times, you can handle some issues yourself. If you do decide to enlist outside counsel, our goal is always to help you prepare, and also to save time, money, and achieve the best possible results. As always, we want to first welcome David Bazar, our attorney from the Bazar and Associates law firm in East Providence, who continues to provide us with information on this topic. And together, David and I would like to welcome our special guest today, attorney Roberto Gonzales from the Gonzales law firm in East Providence. This is a multi-practice firm which specializes in family and business and immigration. So today, the topic is immigration, and specifically we're going to tackle the currently contentious and newsworthy issue, Title 42, which referred to the Trump-era pandemic restrictions that blocked migrants from coming into the United States through the Mexican border. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced recently, as of this taping, that President Joe Biden's administration was about to lift those restrictions in May. And so we're going to discuss what is happening with immigration. What is the status? What are the changes? And what does this mean for the U.S. border and for our people locally? Also, there are many issues going on still with COVID. It's impacting things that are going on in the Senate. It's impacting what's happening with President Biden, and it's impacting our lives. So let's start with a little bit of a tutorial on things relative to immigration. So since you've been handling this for so long, what's the status? What's immigration about? What's the status currently as we're speaking here today?
So nothing much has really changed from the Trump administration to the Biden administration, except maybe that it's a more humane implementation of certain policies. Children are no longer being ripped from the arms of parents who are trying to come into the United States at the border by presenting themselves and asking for asylum. So that part has changed. The Biden administration has spent a tremendous amount of effort and money trying to locate parents that were separated from their children and to reunify these parents and children. That's still an ongoing situation. But in terms of laws, Congress is responsible for passing immigration laws, and to date, Congress has not been able to implement any kind of significant changes to the immigration law. Biden did put a stop to a number of policies that were in effect. For example, the building of the wall, which many people thought was completely ineffective, at best a symbolic gesture, but that has now been curtailed to just repairing existing sections of the wall. There are literally tens of thousands of would-be migrants amassed on the Mexican side of the border as of today. They've been accumulating over the months. They are waiting for their turn to get an asylum interview. What our government has said is you have to wait in Mexico until we have the personnel to review your cases and to determine whether or not we're going to allow you to come into the United States. So that is still a big problem because the people are living in unsanitary, unsafe conditions. The people who are on the other side of the border is an interesting group. At first it was mostly Central Americans, and then we saw groups coming from Afghanistan. And now we're seeing the Ukrainians coming over and amassing at the border. And interestingly enough, today President Biden announced that he was going to start a new program for Ukrainians so they can apply without coming to Mexico from Eastern Europe to come to the United States on a special status. And this is supposed to be a fast program. Of course, that raises questions about equity and, why can't we do this for the people that are fleeing, the Haitian political turmoil that's going there, and why can't we do it, for people who are fleeing natural disasters in Central America and things like that. So that's it.
So while we're talking about immigration, there's one other issue that, of course, we face in America, which is a labor shortage. And there has been something called a green card, which allowed people to come in to work. So employment, explain what a green card is, how it pertains to employment, and give us an update about what's going to happen, or what is happening relative to the fact that there are people who want to work here and we have need. Any change?
Yeah, that's the irony. We are in an economy where the lack of workers is pushing the inflationary forces higher and higher. We lack workers to do some very basic jobs, and that is, every economist will tell you that's not good for our economy. So we need these workers. The green card is probably a misnomer. There is no such thing that is a green card. What the green card refers to is an identification card that is issued to lawful permanent residents who have gone through the process of applying to live here permanently in the United States. And people can do that either because they have a close family member. So, for example, you can petition for a spouse. If you go abroad and marry and you want to bring your wife here or your husband here, you can do that, or your children or your parents. So that's family-based immigration green cards. Then there's employment-based. So an employer who has a job that is hard to fill, who can convince the Department of Labor that it's a hard-to-fill job, can apply. Good time to do that now. And by the way, the lawyers that do this kind of work are very busy now. So that's another way that people can get green cards and reside lawfully in the United States.
Are there limitations on the numbers of cards that can be issued?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are numerical limitations based on country that you come from, and based on the year. So only so many people per year are allowed, and they're just about under 1 million altogether.
Yeah.
And they're allocated in different for different categories. So, for example, family, employment would get so many. Asylum would get so many.
Do you still get a number of, you used to do a lot of employers trying to bring people over?
Yes.
I know you did work, I think URI and some other places like that.
Yes.
Is that still active?
That work is still active, and it's yes, it's still very much in demand.
Yeah.
So David, at the beginning of the segment, I mentioned that it was the CDC that announced that Joe Biden had made the announcement that what he's going to do about this upcoming change. We're going to talk about Title 42 in a second. So, and also Roberto mentioned something about Congress making laws. We do know Congress makes laws. As a lawyer, what are the issues relative to the CDC? Do they have the legal power to make the decision about whether or not Title 42 should or shouldn't happen? Is it just about Joe Biden saying, I say because I heard, that CDC says? What's the legal issue about who gets to make the decision, even though we know we want Congress ultimately to pass some laws? How is that all happening?
As Roberto said, immigration laws are passed by Congress.
By Congress.
And the problem I think we've had for the last decade, maybe more, has been that immigration has been all political and not enough policy. You can have different political philosophies that influence policy, but it should all be policy driven. Whatever decisions we make shouldn't be made on how it sells my candidacy for Congress or whatever. It should be based on what's the right policy for the country on immigration. So that's where Congress, for a long time, has been unable to make any laws because they can't agree on policy. They're too busy arguing about politics or posturing for politics. There are a number of laws, or I should say executive orders, that got put in place by presidents. And since Congress hasn't been able to act, presidents from Biden to Trump to Obama all acted through executive orders. And so those are what would be changed. Trump put in, I believe, that an executive order about the border and so forth, and about family separation. Right. And Biden has changed some of the family separation policy, how it's implemented, as Roberto said, procedurally. It's process versus the law. As far as what the CDC says and information they give, I think that's information that would go to the president so that it will impact what decisions he makes on implementing the policy or procedure that he wants to put in place.
Again, that's orders versus Congress having come up with a plan. So we're about to get into it. So let's toss this back to Roberto. Give us a quick snapshot. What's Title 42?
So the CDC implements a policy that says that it's not safe to travel across the border. So we have a crisis at the border with people overwhelming the immigration service. And so this guy who works for Trump by the name of Steve Miller, who's an anti-immigrant policymaker, decides, here is a law, Title 42, that we can use to shut down the border. How convenient. So they use that. And the policy was to, I believe, sunset on May 24th, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere around there.
23rd, 24th.
23rd. Mm-hmm. And what's happened is now there's a discussion, should we extend it? It's not based on health policy. It's based on the numbers of people that are at the border and whether or not it looks good and whether or not Democrats are going to take a beating in November at the ballot because at the election because now they've opened up the border again, and people who are in that middle group who don't necessarily feel that immigration is great for us, would tend to vote against Democrats who support it. So it's a touchy issue. So they use this Title 42 as an immigration tool, which is not meant to be.
They're calling it at times a health tool because that gives CDC's fits their umbrella. And I know we're going to get into this as being a political football, even though we want this to be a legal discussion. This does have overlap, and I don't know how we're going to avoid that. But at the top of the session, when Roberto was saying that there are people who were blocked and mistreated and had troubles at the border, and they were sent back. Now, as we have them supposedly being able to come in, if this is rescinded, they're concerned about the increase of this influx. David, legally, what can happen while this is being bandied about and more people are coming to the border? And I think it was 1.7 million in June of last year that were sent back, no legal recourse. Will they have legal recourse, or how does that work now when they're going to have 1.7 million more plus however many more in the court systems? What's going to happen?
So before I throw that to Roberto, which I'm going to do in a second, I just want to go back to comment on what Roberto said, and it's exactly the problem that I'm saying we have with immigration is that it's so political that even making the right decision, if it is the right decision, won't get done because of the impact it'll have with other people when they run for re-election and so forth. So it becomes a political consideration. And again, the right answer to me is it's policy, not politics, and that's what they need to get to. And I think Roberto already addressed a little bit of what you just asked about having to have the mechanics in place, the number of people in place to be able to deal with folks as they start coming across.
Yes, they're going to have a problem with Border Patrol, but meanwhile...
I'm actually talking about hearing officers and
legally, how will they do that? It's hearing officers, and will they have a queue of lawyers having to deal with it too? How are they going to deal with that?
One of the proposals that is out there right now that looks like it has a chance to be implemented is to reform the asylum system so that asylees at the border will get a quick hearing by an administrator, not by a judge, because that's what the holdup is right now. Okay. These judges at the border are swamped with cases, and people are not given due process. They're expected to prove that they're fleeing persecution when all they come with is the shirt on their backs. And, they don't have evidence of, being tortured or, necessarily. Some do. But anyway, the reforms that are being discussed would lift up a program where adjudicating officers, these would be people that are not judges, which are under the Department of Justice, but these are people that work under the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, would do the initial hearing. We have that now, but they can't decide a case. They do what's called a credible fear hearing, and they make a recommendation. But this new policy would allow them to actually make a decision on the case. Of course, either party can appeal it to a judge, but that would clear up a good number of cases at the border, quick resolution, and so forth. So let's see what happens with that.
So one other point about, considering this was initiated as a health issue and an important health tool, a health regulation tool, as they said, does it make sense that they still have to both have the money and the resources to make sure that folks who are coming in by the millions don't have COVID? Are they going to, I know that we're talking about politics, the Democrats and others are trying to get more money for COVID testing, and this is being bandied about by Republicans and Democrats alike. Knowing that it's going to cost more money to do this testing, does that seem like a reasonable thing? Does that look like it's going to have to be set up so that they can have the testing and also have vaccinations for people at the border so that they don't cause a health problem?
Well, that certainly is an easy enough thing to accomplish. There are facilities now for doing testing and for doing the vaccinations. We have the tools to do that now.
Yes.
At least that's what we're being told everywhere,
yes.
That this is now an endemic, not a pandemic. So, let's use these tools with the immigrants that are ready to come to this country and work and help us.
And then I guess I'll address this to both of you, perhaps to you initially, Roberto. There's always a concern about smugglers and bad actors, or whatever they want to call them, coming into the borders, and also bringing people in, or cartels and all the rest. How do you propose, or how do you think this is going to be handled if you're going to have new administrators who may or may not be capable of doing? What are your thoughts about this?
The thing that we have to remember is that the Department of Homeland Security, which Immigration Service falls under, is one of the top law enforcement agencies in the country. Certainly one of the biggest, if not the biggest, law enforcement agencies, with all of the modern tools, including facial recognition, biometrics, everything at their disposal. So it's so easy for people to be identified at the border and to be screened at the border to make sure that they're not bad actors. I'm not saying that it's that it's 100%, but certainly it's not. But nothing is. So,
Sure.
But we do a pretty good job there.
So David, if there was a time under Title 42 where they could say, sorry, you can't come in and you have to go back, there was no recourse, there was no ability to appeal that. Now that's going to change. Again, do you see that that's going to end up being an issue for lawyers to contend with, in addition to someone who's maybe blocked because we suspect that you're a criminal, but we don't know, and don't you have an opportunity to have your day in court? What's going to happen in that case, David?
I think there's certainly the opportunity for lawyers to be involved and to help people, just like they would in any other immigration case as it proceeds through the system. We have to wait and see a little bit, as Roberto's saying, is what is the program that gets put in place at the first level where there's an administrative hearing, so to speak. That's how I would equate that, where that is being determined by administrator, just for the sake of getting in and out quickly. Those things may be done with lawyers or without lawyers, but if there's a denial and an appeal process, you should have the opportunity to have a lawyer jump in and get ready for a hearing in front of a judge.
Would any other lawyer, other than one who specializes, to the extent that you claim that, immigration law, so we know Roberto does a lot of immigration law, will there be more immigration lawyers or more who have to specialize in it, or can other lawyers handle that, because it's not just about immigration now, it's about other trials and other issues? How does that work these days?
No, I think other lawyers can handle it. Certainly the ACLU, for example, has been involved in a number of cases that are, they're framed as due process cases sometimes, but they are really immigration in the immigration context. So yeah, you see a lot of that. And yesterday we had a decision from a Florida judge saying that we don't need to use the mask anymore, and now the CDC wants Biden to appeal it, so there's going to be an appeal. So I don't think that decision has anything to do with immigration, but certainly, you could see the CDC being challenged.
Yes.
In the policies that they've implemented, and whether or not they have authority to implement those policies or not.
Authority, they certainly have influence. So David, you talk about it's Congress's job to make legislation. We know that there are things that are being challenged and things that need to be proposed, and we also know that we have an upcoming midterm. What do you see? Do you see that that is going to be a serious impediment to getting legislation done now of any kind, because everyone has a dog in the fight?
It's been a problem for a while. I don't see that changing
Ever.
right away.
Yeah, I agree.
And so you have handled immigration cases in general for quite a while. I guess I would want to ask you, how are you finding the impact, or are you finding the impact of Title 42, or just with what President Biden is proposing? How has that changed people's interest or need to deal with immigration specialists?
So it has had more of an impact on the border. We haven't seen much of an impact here.
Okay, and then another very important immigration question, and perhaps it's one that we had discussed years ago. There is supposedly an issue about DACA and Dreamers now finding a pathway. What's the status of that, and what are your thoughts on it?
So when Trump came into office, he immediately tried to end the DACA program.
Let me interrupt myself and you and explain what DACA is, because
Okay, DACA is the program commonly known as Dreamers program. It's like break down the acronym for you, I would, but I'm afraid I'll mess it up. But anyway, it's a program for young people who came here before the age of 12, I believe, and who have lived here since at least 2012, and who have remained out of trouble and have gone to school. High school diploma, or at least being in high school, is a requirement. And what it does, it doesn't give you a green card. What it gives you is a work authorization card, and it gives you a quasi-legal status, so you can live here and work here without having
Fear of being
right,
deported.
the danger of being deported. So that program has been used by about 800,000 people nationwide. These are young people who have been here just about, they're almost as American as any other
Sure.
American kid. The program has allowed these kids to work and live pretty normal lives. So the idea was that at some point they would get a green card or permanent resident status in the United States. That part has not happened. And again, it gets caught up in the politics in Congress. So, you know, that is a still held up program. Trump ended it, Biden restarted it, and it's still going on.
So there isn't anything on the books right now, as of this taping anyway, that says that there is a pathway, but
No.
the inclination is at least to try to find one. At the moment, they don't have the pathway, and it's not legislated yet, but it seems that, am I correct? It seems
Yes.
that there's more of an opportunity.
Yes, it is, I think, believed by most people that if there was some kind of immigration reform, certainly Dreamers or DACA holders would be among the first that would be considered, and then there would be those that have temporary protected status, or TPS as is commonly known, which, by the way, the Ukrainians are going to get TPS.
They are.
Right, from what I've heard. And there are other TPS holders in this country, Salvadorans, Honduranians, and a number of other groups. So all of these people might be able to get some legal status.
So with a little immigration reform, some policy that makes sense, we could have a pathway to citizenship for people.
Those people, start small maybe, and since the big package is never going to fly, I don't think.
I think that you raise a very important issue here, because what's been going on forever, politically, as a football, financially, and whatever else, at least if they could do it in increments, perhaps that's not such a bitter pill. And I think we see on both sides of the fence, they want to have something in place. And what's the one thing that maybe they can agree on? Perhaps it's for those who are here.
Yes.
David, any other thoughts about
No,
that?
I just was thinking that I remember a scene in my head where when Trump was president and he was sitting with a bunch of folks from the Senate or the House or whatever, and they were talking about immigration. He said, yeah, we can do this. And then, no, it became political again.
Right.
Well, hopefully we will get some positive movement on this. Roberto, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Deb.
We thank you for tuning into The Law Matters. As we say, stay tuned. The law matters to you.